Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Digital Leader Show, where we talk key issues and news at the intersection of business and technology in hopes of making you a better digital leader. We're live every Wednesday at noon Eastern, 9 Pacific on LinkedIn, YouTube, and the audio recording is available the following week wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Dan Goodstein. I head up IRPA AI. We're a professional association, media, and peer-to-peer research network providing education, networking, and advice to over 130,000 members worldwide, all on automation, enterprise AI, and digital transformation. Today, we're discussing how U.S. AI policy is shaping enterprise innovation, plus headlines for digital leaders from the world of enterprise technology. Thanks to our sponsor, Oracle NetSuite, their cloud ERP helps provide real-time visibility into operational and financial performance. Podcast followers can get preferred pricing of up to 45% off at irpaai.com/NetSuite. I'm joined today by Chris Surdak. He's a senior analyst for IRPA AI, formerly White House Chief Transformation Office Advisor, partner for digital transformation at Gartner, and automation AI practice lead at EY. Chris, this is the perfect show for you because we get to talk about what's going on in Washington.
Yeah, I don't know that we want transparency, to be perfectly honest. I'm not sure that we're entirely ready for that kind of transparency, but, you know, pop some popcorn because it's going to be fascinating.
It's going to be fascinating. What's one of the things that's fascinating is the, updates around, before we get to our main topic, the updates around just regulation, in general. I mean, prior to, the Trump administration, a relatively regulation-centric administration in the U.S., now seemingly a less regulatory atmosphere, but there's still some ongoing things happening that predate the Trump administration, and they're either just not prioritizing or not putting the brakes on it. But still some trials going on. The big one is the Google antitrust lawsuit. And testimony this week coming out is saying that the tech giant paid Samsung a pretty hefty monthly fee and agreed to revenue sharing in exchange for pre-installing Gemini on all Galaxy devices, even over Samsung's own AI for at least a 2-year period. So more and more kind of things coming out that the government is saying at least, proves that this is an unfair monopoly.
Well, hey, everyone, there's this thing called the mafia, and they're rich and powerful, and they use their their wealth and power to make more wealth and power. Beauregard, fetch me my fainting couch. Oh my gosh, you're kidding me. You mean Google is a monopoly and it manipulates the markets? No way.
So you're not surprised. You're not surprised that they're continuing to kind of go after Google. So many other of these kind of regulations have been dropped, or executive orders coming out saying we're not going to enforce them.
Well, I think what this represents is it's basically another shakedown. No different than the shakedown that the government did with Microsoft, which is half legitimate, right? Microsoft was a monopoly 30 years ago. They kind of still are to a certain extent. But there's this constant struggle between who actually is powerful and who can actually make decisions. This has been true with Apple back, when the terror shooting just a few miles from my house here in San Bernardino a few years ago. And Apple was like, we're not going to unlock the phone so you can see the person's messages. The FBI unlocked the phone the next day. They always had the codes to unlock the phone. They just didn't want anyone to know, and they wanted Apple to capitulate in that instance. So it's a degree of a power struggle. I mean, if you wanted to stop Google from being a monopoly, that was 23 years ago, maybe. Yeah. So we're living with the consequences now. But by the same token, that's what. In light of the conversation, there's this old saying, the U.S. innovates, China duplicates, and the EU regulates. So if we ever get in the position where we're not innovating, then we're kind of falling out of our role in that triumvirate. And so there's a point at which the government needs to reassert some degree of control over the companies, but I think that window's probably long since gone.
Well, this is seen by many as a kind of a new litmus test for, you know, just how these kind of tech ecosystems and innovation will play out. So we're not going to have a final ruling until the fall, it looks like. But in the meantime, there's some people vying for Google's assets, including OpenAI, who came out recently and said that they're interested in purchasing Google Chrome if Alphabet's forced to sell the browser, and they're making a significant leap in the search space. Their web integrated search feature in Europe saw monthly active users jump from 11 million to 41 million active users in just 6 months. The rapid growth is putting them at the cusp of this EU Digital Services Act that forces controls over platforms exceeding 45 million active recipients. But clearly, they're interested in the search space.
For Sam Altman immediately making an offer for Chrome should tell you everything you need to know about how like underhanded and evil Chrome is, or just the browser wars are. The other thing when I saw that, the first thing I thought of, okay, of the 43 million, how many of those are bots, either Chinese or Serbian or whatever, right? To try to force it over the 45 number so that you could force regulation upon Google, which is largely unregulated, to my earlier point. I'd be fascinated to know that number. But if there's, we're deeply into the old Chinese curse, may you live in interesting times, and it just keeps getting more interesting. You're going to see a lot of the entrenched powers that be over the course of the last 20 years are going to come under a fair amount of attack and questioning as we go through sort of a global realignment of power and wealth generation. You know, not to pat myself on the back, but it's kind of exactly what I wrote in my now 12-year-old book Jerk, and it's all coming kind of to pass as predicted. So
I guess I have to read that book. I won't have to interview you if I actually just read that book, huh?
I hate being right all the time.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. It's like you know, it's out there, but then you got to keep reminding people that it's out there. Well, even OpenAI, I mean, aside from its the AI controversy in general, there's a big growing slew of people that are trying to block them from becoming profitable, and getting out of this nonprofit status, which everybody from Elon Musk, maybe for different reasons, but everyone from Elon Musk to local politicians, academics, former OpenAI staffers are trying to block this conversion to its for-profit models. And I think you said even before we went live that they're losing money. So I guess maybe that's okay if you're nonprofit, but not if you're a for-profit, right?
Well, and I mean this in all earnestness. I wouldn't be surprised if they're trying to get nonprofit or get profit status so that they can write off for tax purposes the $250 billion that they're burning up. This is why Trump went like 20 something years without ever paying taxes, because he took such a heavy loss early in his career. Same thing, right? So if OpenAI is literally setting fire to about $1 billion a day in losses, they mean, you could Microsoft would never have to pay taxes ever again for the rest of its existence if you could pull off this status. So, I think it's not to do good, right? It's not out of the kindness of their heart that they want to become profitable or get that change in status. There's always, it's the old saying, follow the money, right?
How much runway do you think they get? I mean, you think about, and I forget the exact number, but how long it took Amazon to become profitable. And it was one of the most, in the process, I think it's profitable now, but in the height of its debt, it was still one of the highest stock prices, on Wall Street at one point. So, and this is, arguably a bigger trend than that was at the time, right? So how much runway do you think they get?
It was the same strategy. It was the land grab strategy, right? And so Google's twisting Samsung's arm to get into all of their phones, so they could get a bigger footprint for AI. Same strategy. It's the land grab. And then, any dollar, if you're in a growing market with positive cash flow, particularly in the world right now where like we're so deeply in debt and so forth, if you can get a decent return, if you're buying your way into a market with a high rate of growth and you have positive cash flow, you should not have a single dollar of profit on you. You should be putting every dollar that you have into that growing market that has a positive cash flow. If you have a negative cash flow, then you got to be a little bit more concerned. But if it's a growing market and positive cash flow, you should not make any money at all. You should be reinvesting. That's what Amazon did, which is why they, are there any stores, retail stores left anymore? I think I have 2 packages on my front door right now from Amazon. And that was the strategy that they followed. There's a sense that that's the strategy with AI. My challenge with AI is where's the cash flow, right? There is no positive cash flow in this space right now. It's still deeply negative. So yeah, it's growing fast, but if it's growing fast and you're losing money on every transaction, that's kind of a poor combination.
Speaking of losing money, Tesla sales have completely sink. They say amid tariff woes, depending on who you ask, right? Related to Elon's involvement in Doge, but both sales and earnings in the first quarter missed estimates. I mean, they were down at one point. I don't know if it's still this high, but down like 70% at one point. Yeah, you gotta start wondering about the conflict of interest thing. Like, is his involvement, right, whether you like it or not, like him or not, is his involvement, good for business?
He is not shy about saying that there's obviously a pressure campaign to get him out of that and just back to business. And I think, to a degree it's working. But also there's a general affordability of cars across the board. Who has money? Who can afford to buy a new car? And just general inflation and so forth. So I think this is taking a wider range of trends and labeling it the way you want for some other, like the gains in terms of information warfare, information leverage that companies want. But yeah, I think he had to expect that there was going to be this sort of pushback. I don't think he expected people to be firebombing his showrooms in the United States, but the world's gotten a little crazy. Fundamentally, it's a great company with a great product that people, I think, generally love. And at some point, sort of something else will take over as front page news. And the people that are potentially losing money on the value of the stock, I think you could argue the stock market is pretty overvalued as it is, but.
Yeah. Speaking of, Intel has announced another round of layoffs. 20% of the current workforce, according to Bloomberg. Intel CEO is moving pretty quick to restructure things, but what a miss. I mean, in this world, it's one thing to say, hey, I'm down and all my competitors are down, and maybe I'm down a couple percentage points, more than that. Maybe we made some bad decisions, but the industry's down, tariffs, right? All the usual excuses these days. But when you see NVIDIA's numbers and some of the other chip manufacturers' numbers, you're like, I mean, is this just complete missed opportunity, missed management? I mean, what happened here?
To see an inventor of the tech industry as we know it. This is a company that Silicon Valley is named after the chips that they make, or at least used to make. So to see Intel get blockbustered is pretty shocking. But by the same, I kind of view it a little bit differently. You have 120,000 employees, and all of a sudden you say, we have 20,000 too many employees. That's not like saying we missed. We're going to lay off 50 people because things are slowing down. You're getting rid of 20,000 people. How badly are you managing your business that you had 20,000 effectively unnecessary or unneeded people on payroll? How do you possibly justify that? So I can't wait to see what the justification is. But they've been bleeding for quite a while now, and I think trying to find out what they want to be when they grow up. So this sort of midlife crisis is not terribly surprising. But that's the part of the story I find fascinating. How do you have 20,000 people that all of a sudden you don't need anymore? I mean, unless you're cutting your production by at least that much. And I'm just glad I don't work for their HR department.
Yeah, well, we see this over and over again, right? I mean, I don't know if this is necessarily the case with Intel. I haven't researched it, but there's, in the spaces we cover, Chris, right? Automation, AI, just technology in general. I mean, it's like every week there's somebody acquiring somebody, and then somebody spinning off or divesting somebody, and it's like, well, you go through this like. They say it's cyclical, but I just wonder how necessary it is, right? You buy up companies, you buy up companies, you buy up companies, you get into financial trouble, and then you start spinning off companies, We've seen it with the Xeroxes of the world and the Kodaks of the world and those guys. I saw there's a activist hedge fund, Elliott Management, who just took a $1.5 billion stake in HP Enterprise. I mean, they've gone back and forth between HP Enterprise, spin off this business, acquire that. But I mean, it's just wild.
Well, and it's funny you mentioned HP, because when I was at HP, they were going through that massive amount of acquisitions and so forth, and then divested printers, which was responsible. The printing business at the time was responsible for like 130% of their profits. The entire rest of the business was unprofitable, and the money they made off of their ridiculously priced printing cartridges made up for all of it. And I think all the acquisitions they did in the mid 2010s destroyed something on the order of about $15 billion of investor value. So generally, it's a lot of this acquisition stuff is a way, it's all bookkeeping, and it's a way of making the numbers look better on the books than they necessarily are. I think one of the challenges, and again, love him or hate him, Trump is talking about trying to bring manufacturing and stuff back to the US. We don't build anything anymore. If it really feels that way, or we do, we were the arsenal of democracy. We won World War II in our factories, more so than on the battlefield. And now, we're a financial services market. It's moving numbers from one column to another and pretending that that's productivity. At some point, you have to make something and not just move the numbers back and forth on the balance sheets. And so I think that this is reflective of that. All this acquisition is, you're getting the IP, but are you building things? Are you producing anything? We've really lost a lot of that, I think, in the US, and now we're paying the price for it.
Yeah. Last headline before we jump into the main topic is the European Union is fining Apple. This came out just a little while ago before we went on the air. Fining Apple and Meta nearly $800 million, or I don't know if maybe it's euros. Apple, of course, is going to appeal it. Meta said they're likely to appeal it as well. But the accusation is that the EU is attempting to target now American businesses. So do you think this is just typical, as you said before, right? EU regulation that's been in the works for a while, because I know the act that they're using has been there for a while, or is this starting to become retaliatory trade war stuff?
It's a counter tariff. You say potato, I say potato. So I call it a tariff, you call it a fine. I think what's very instructive in what the EU said is this is the start of an ongoing set of fines if you don't come up with compliance and so forth. It's just a counter tariff, and it's a way of trying to monetize again that sort of dominance that some American-based companies have in their various spaces, particularly around information management. Europe has really lost its way in its ability to innovate. And it was producing, parts of Europe were producing a lot of stuff. I mean, lots of cars and so forth, until their gas was largely shut off. Most of the economy of Europe is driven by Germany, and most of Germany's economy was from high-tech and precise manufacture that was all empowered by Russian gas. So you shut off the gas line and the whole thing kind of collapses on itself. So counter tariff, source of funds for the EU government. And the typical tit for tat that you're seeing globally. Again, love him or hate him, Trump is a TV star, right? He's an actor, a reality TV star. So, and if you read his book from 1987, I read it in college, The Art of the Deal. Be disruptive, like shake up the table. And that's exactly what he's doing. Is it causing all kinds of agita around the world? Yeah, but that's very purposeful. It makes for good TV, if not great economics.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, one thing that's happening, and this is our main topic for today, is AI policy shift, right? And we alluded to it when we started, but the culture, I think, and my assessment, the culture, in September, October, November was, 1 part AI is great and 3 parts slow it down, regulate it, be careful, be conservative. Certainly in the EU, but especially as well in the US. And not only has the current administration kind of reversed a lot of that, they've made some proactive executive orders and policy statements around, really removing the bureaucratic barriers and promoting kind of a pro innovation, forward leaning, AI centric, maybe even attitude. And I can't remember, I remember back in the outsourcing days where politicians would bring up outsourcing only in an election cycle, and realized, that they either didn't get or didn't want to talk about the full picture of the economy, the world economy, and outsourcing, and even in just tech innovation. I can't remember. I mean, you've been doing this longer. You spent some time in Washington doing this, but I can't remember, an administration talking about technology the way that. Maybe the internet, maybe like Wi-Fi for all, some of those programs. But, I can't remember the last time a technology became essentially a policy mandate.
For Simpsons fans, it kind of reminds me of Mr. Burns saying, release the hounds. Part of the point of government is to keep things predictable, right? For business to make, and I've said this oftentimes about regulation in the law and regulations don't move quickly because something's got to be stable. Like if I'm going to write a contract with you, and we're going to do a multi-billion-dollar deal over some years, I need some faith that things are going to stay the same over that period of time before I'm willing to take that risk. So there's always a push me, pull you in government of how do we protect those who benefit from the status quo, but how do we also ensure that we're growing, developing, staying innovative, and have opportunities for again, growth. I think the prior administration was very much in that kind of conservative, protective, this AI stuff is kind of scary, so maybe we need to slow it down a little bit. Where again, Donald Trump, it makes for great TV. Hey, AI for everybody, go for it. We're going to deregulate everything. And simultaneously has done the same thing with crypto, right? Crypto was kind of cut off for the last couple of years. And again, release the hounds, no more crypto regulation. Everybody gets a blockchain. I think in part, it's a recognition that we're sort of past the point of we need to protect ourselves and getting to the point of we got to grow. We got to come up with something new. We need new areas of investment or we're going to perish. Which is a philosophical shift, but I think it also is the reality when you look at the finances of our country, right? We're going $1 billion into debt deeper every day. So money's got to come from somewhere to cover that.
Well, to me, there's kind of 2 aspects of it. I mean, one is the regulatory friction, right? So, revoking earlier executive orders from the previous administration that imposed strict federal governance on AI, with the footnote of, hey, this arguably stifled private sector innovation and U.S. global competitiveness, especially against rivals like China. So it's one part taking the walls down, but the other part is actually, there's this policy memos on AI asking government agencies to prioritize high impact areas where AI can deliver value. So they're not just saying, hey, we're going to drop the restrictions. We're saying, hey, all you agencies, we want you to implement AI. We want you to, I think there was a one last week where they asked every major department to assign a chief AI officer. And unlike the chief AI officers of maybe a year ago, these are not just compliance governance people. These are innovators.
Yeah, we're switching from, the department of no, you can't do that, no, you can't do this, to the department of yes, or maybe yes, but, or yes, and. From that perspective, it's probably a good thing. But again, you got to have some metrics around it, right? Go figure out how AI can help, the DMV. It probably could, but you have to fundamentally change the function of the DM. If it doesn't hurt, it's not transformational. And so, and you and I have talked about this for well over a decade. All kinds of people are, oh, we digitally transformed. All right, what do you do differently? We're 2% faster than we were 5 years ago. That's not transformation. Hate to break it to you. And our stock is up 6% since then. Yeah, well, let's account for inflation. And that means you've lost 20%. Lots of people want to say that they made change, but they didn't really. And I think a lot of both companies and governments, they went on a diet. They switched from donuts to pizza. They didn't really do anything different. So again, I think there's a realization that we're in such a deep hole as a country that we're not going to cost cut our way. We're trying to cost cut, but we're not going to cost cut our way to greatness here. We're going to have to innovate. We're going to have to make more money as well. And that's going to come from technology and innovation. So I think it's a major sea change, but it's also reflective of the reality that we find ourselves in.
So the policy, if you look at kind of like the mission statement behind it is, to solidify American dominance in AI. Certainly some of the announcements you've seen kind of indicate that, linking tech leadership with national security and economic interests. But the third, which is, related to all of this, is to limit AI exports to adversarial nations through what they call the AI diffusion rule. So additional export controls and in particular on advanced semiconductors. So it's kind of like innovate. Let's drop the regulations, but let's kind of keep it here in the U.S. And by the way, you can't export this. And by the way, we're going to make it very difficult to export this. So it's really maybe not no surprise, but very much a U.S. centric policy, right?
Words matter, particularly when you're dealing with like regulators, because they live in a world of words and meaning behind the words. And I think it's important when you look at regulatory action or these sorts of policy actions by a government. For any given technology, our government's probably a good 10 to 15 years ahead of what you can access in the open market. There's a gajillion-dollar black budget for a reason. So policymakers, depending upon their level and their access to information, have much greater insight into the futures of what these technologies can achieve than the layperson, following memes on LinkedIn. So for them to talk about the strategic imperative, dominance of this technology, limiting access to potential enemies and threats, they're talking from some hand-on experience that you and I don't have when we're talking to ChatGPT. I mean, to kind of be blunt, right? Anthropic, or the French are trying hard too, but they're not quite at the same level. But weren't the French, I think, the third country to actually have nuclear weapons? So, look at our policy around uranium and plutonium in about 1946, 7, and 8, and that'll give you a good sense of why we're changing this sort of policy around AI related stuff here in 2025, 6, and 7.
So, you worked with the White House at some point. We're advising on all things transformation. What are some of the the areas that you think, I know you're not, connected now there, but, if you think about, general areas that, should be prioritized as kind of high impact where AI can, deliver the most benefits. Any jump out to you?
It's difficult because it's hard to say exactly how AI is beneficial in a lot of the use cases we have now. When you look at a general use, the positive and the negative of large language models as they've been deployed by the Anthropics and Googles and ChatGPTs of the world is that you're trying to answer any possible question about any possible topic using all available information. And so rather than making more emphasis on expertise and making experts even more expert, you've kind of created this giant, the big 8 balls that you would shake and you turn it over and you'd ask it a question and it'd give you a guess. We're creating $1 trillion better guesser to a certain extent, where this technology can become truly revolutionary is where we're using it to ask specific questions about specific problem areas, leveraging all the possible expertise that's out there. That's where you see transformational results. And so I think the administration probably recognizes that this is very use case dependent and is going to try to start steering people more towards those use case specific outcomes rather than, ChatGPT is sort of like a smartphone arcade game. Right. Yeah. So you drop in a quarter and you get entertained for 4 minutes, like, Minesweeper or Centipede from the late 1980s. It really feels like that. It's more, it's a cute interface and I can make funny memes and so forth. That's not going to be transformational to our economy. It's not going to be transformational to our society. If anything, it could potentially be negative. So I think what the government has seen in their own applications of the technology is this stuff really can be revolutionary if you're very particular about how, where, when, and why you use it. And so in as much as we're trying to, I saw the other, why do we care so much about the Panama Canal and Greenland all of a sudden? How many people can find Greenland on a map if they know how to read a map? There's sort of a return to the Monroe Doctrine, from 200 years ago, that we're going to dominate this hemisphere and the rest of you are on your own. So in as much as AI gives us the potential to repatriate or reshore production, manufacturing, et cetera, but mitigating some of the higher costs that we have for labor here. That's I think, one of the other reasons that you see this loosening up and change of focus in how we regulate this stuff, because we're trying to claw back productivity in our country, but recognize that labor costs here are higher than they are in the rest of the world, which is what drove us to offshoring for the last 30 years in the first place.
Yeah. So there's a memo on the White House website that talks about a couple different areas: critical infrastructure being one, healthcare diagnostics, government benefit programs, fraud detection, just to name a few. I also saw an article this morning that the Trump administration is reportedly considering an executive order to integrate AI training and tools into K-12 classrooms, which is, according to the Washington Post, which is pretty prolific, right? In a world where we've talked about, a gazillion times, right, the disconnect between the education systems in the U.S. and the workforce, the technology workforce. I was surprised to see that, but happy to see that.
I'll take that over them. My kids learning on TikTok any day. Right. There's a reason even my 15-year-old does not have access to social media, and she refuses to use it. And God bless her for that. Having helped build these systems 15 years ago, I'm like, over my dead body, are you going to get on that platform? So I think this is reflective of what we just said. We're looking to use AI to improve infrastructure investments. That's an investment for future capacity. Our American infrastructure is crumbling because we haven't really invested in it very much since the Eisenhower highway system was rolled out. Conversely, the Chinese have their global Belt and Road initiative, which is all about infrastructure to improve efficiency and effectiveness. Then the other two he mentions are very cost-cutting focused. I think this is taking a very glasses half full perspective of using AI. Kids are their future. We need to have them be technology literate going forward. So I think this is an investment in the future of America kind of thing. Tough to get much mileage out of that when our population is aging like crazy and we're far below replacement levels, but it's a good start. So I think this is reflective of getting back to what made America kind of great to begin with. America innovates, China duplicates, and Europe regulates. So hopefully it gets positive results, it's better than doing nothing, I would say.
I don't know what's crazier, the fact that the government's issuing technology orders now, or the fact that their websites run on WordPress.
There you go, right? I mean, it's it's the meme from LinkedIn where you have the global financial system all operating on one Excel spreadsheet somewhere, and that's largely true. We have so much technology debt; it's astonishing.
But the other opportunity, Chris, that I see here is, and I said at the beginning that it seems like some of this stuff is at odds, that they're lowering regulation, but meanwhile this Google antitrust case is still going, Facebook case is still going, and all of that. But where I think the opportunity may be, and maybe this is the logic behind it, is creating a more startup tech company centric economy, right? Where, not only are we pro technology, but we're pro startup technology. I mean, if you lower the barriers of entry, you reduce the regulatory complexity and compliance costs, it means smaller firms now can enter the market more easily, right? And kind of challenge incumbents. And there is even some directives in here that talk about discouraging rules and policy that give larger companies, advantages, kind of automatic advantages that you might see in typical government services, creating more transparent procurement and project pipelines and the like. So I don't know. I hopefully it's not just talk. If this becomes really a door opener, then that's where you say, hey, wait a second, maybe regulation can be tweaked to actually create better competition and more innovation.
I think without question, when some businesses need a tremendous scale to even function, like if you were going to become a dominant in producing steel in the late 1800s, you needed a ton of capital and you needed to concentrate and centralize wealth so that you could build a big steel mill. All of a sudden you were like dominating in steel. But someone first had to figure out, hey, if I put this chunk of iron and I put it in a blast furnace, out comes steel and it's better. So you're always going to get a higher degree of innovation from smaller and smaller units of production and units of thought down to the individual. And then once it's discovered, then you need scale and scope and lots of bureaucracy and lots of capital to like kind of bring it out to the whole world. But I think there's generally a recognition that things have slowed. Our level of innovation has really slowed down quite a bit, I would argue, over the last probably decade. And that's because we're up against this wall of digital transformation, moving from a capital-centric society to an information-centric society. And we keep butting up against that competition between, the old wealth and the new wealth to a certain extent. And so to kind of blast through it, you just have to have some people. You need to lower the barriers for the next Steve Jobs, the next Bill Gates, the next Elon Musk to come along, come up with something entirely new and disruptive, and then let them bring it to market. And then all of a sudden you get back in that acquisition cycle that we talked at the very beginning of the show, right? Big dumb company can't make its numbers meet, but it's going to acquire 15 startups with their innovation, and then all of a sudden you have scale. So it's very Darwinian actually. But if you don't have the bottom of the food chain, the protozoas, then you can never get to like the big gray whale out or blue whale out in the middle of the ocean, the biggest animal ever, which would be a Google.
It's almost easy to forget, I guess, especially for our younger viewers, that Steve Jobs and Bill Gates and Jeff Bezos started in a garage at one point.
Well, yeah, I mean, and now they're Dr. Evils, by their own admission. But then that means, again, for the cycle has to continue. So you need to identify and nucleate the next generation of those future moguls, so to speak. And if we're so heavily regulated, those people either can't get off the ground or they get rapidly. There's an astonishing number of acquisitions that happen out there in the world that are designed to prevent new innovations and new technologies from getting deployed because they're threatening the status quo. If you're Google and you're sitting on, I don't know, $500 billion of cash and someone comes up with a better Google Chrome, I'm just going to, there's another Simpsons episode where Bill Gates goes in and buys out Homer and you think he's going to get paid. He doesn't get paid. They just smash his computer and beat him up. So, I mean, that's a little bit of, so be careful what you wish for if you're an inventor, an entrepreneur, innovator, because your buyout may not be exactly what you think it's going to be. Yeah. But it's to refeed the pump of innovation that comes really at the individual level, not at an organizational level.
Well, being that was our second Simpsons reference of the show, I think we're ready to wrap. But Chris, thank you. But I appreciate the insights from kind of a former insider. You spent some time advising on this stuff in the government space. I know you've spent some time in all these different industries, and they all have their own nuance. But interesting. I mean, I think this is the first time I've been excited about a government policy in a while.
Yeah, that's got to make you pause for a moment and wonder. But no, we may be forced into this sort of change kicking and screaming, but if you're kicking and screaming, that means you're probably about to embrace some actual change instead of just talking about it. So in some ways, I view it as a good thing.
Yeah. Well, thanks for joining us, everybody. I hope you enjoyed the show. If you have any comments, questions, or suggested topics, please reach out to us. In the meantime, we'll be back Wednesday at noon Eastern, 9 Pacific. If there's something that you're working on and you need some help with, let us know. We're here to help. Schedule a call with one of our analysts. It's a free service we provide as an industry association. Or if you're on the vendor side and you're looking to promote some products, some services, some things that you're doing, go check out IRPAAI.com. All the links are there. In the meantime, have a great week, everybody, and we'll see you same time next week. Take care. Thanks, Chris.